right, so joining the Rapcast today is Matt Devlin, voice of the Raptors and oftentimes the voice of reason when it comes to the Raptors. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, how you doing?
Great, I'm great. So how's your summer been so far? I know you just got back from vacation. Things are looking up, or are you kind of missing the NBA regular season?
Well, you know what? You always miss the NBA. Summer's been great. Obviously, started a little bit earlier than I think I expected, or a lot of fans expected, and was able to jump in and do some Blue Jays games, and right after that, headed to Las Vegas for Summer League, which is always a great time, just because it's as if the NBA moves to Vegas in the summertime in July. And it's always good to be a part of that and do some summer league games, and then right after that into a little bit of vacation, and now kind of back into the flow and getting ready for school to start with the kids and getting ready for college football, and then on to training camp for the Raptors.
I was wondering why the Jays are doing so well this year. I think you blessed them with some luck this year.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I had them for a stretch of 10 games, and they struggled a little bit during that time. But, it's amazing when you get some good pitching and you play some good defense and you get timely hitting, good things happen.
Yeah. So, you always talk about players going into the off season and working on their game a little bit, or putting on 10 pounds of muscle. So as an announcer, is there like a equivalent for an announcer what they do over the summer to prepare themselves for next season? Is that something that you have like a routine of, like maybe hit the gym a little bit, or I don't know, something like that?
You know what? I think you try to hit the gym a little bit more than you do during the season, 4 games in 5 nights in 4 different cities. But no, you know what? For me, it really just becomes, more a family time, and trying to really catch up with, my wife and 3 boys, and try to enjoy the time in Toronto, because obviously, during the course of the regular season, you're, traveling so much. And so it kind of becomes that. And then, we're fortunate, here in Toronto, to have NBA TV and be able to, watch, Raptor games. And I do go back when they're on, and I do, listen to games and stuff like that. I think that's always been something that throughout my career, I've done, whether it's been with football, basketball, or baseball. You listen to, different things and things that you like or things that you want to improve upon. I think that that's always, something that you kind of think about, and jot down some notes, and try to bring into, the next season. But, ultimately, a lot of it, for me, with the ages that my 3 boys are in and at right now, it's about spending time with them and my wife, and then knowing that, you're going to be back on the road soon.
So some good news for you, I guess, is that there was an article on Grandland, I think, where they mentioned that somebody got a sneak peek of the NBA schedule, and very, very little, if any, 4 games in 5 nights for most teams. So that's got to be good news for you, because I guess you still obviously play 41 road games, but apparently it's not as condensed or as aggressive as it was in years past. I think people being more cognizant, I guess, of the number of minutes players are playing, and trying to reduce that and trying to reduce the stress level on players. So that's one positive to come out of the NBA schedule this season, even though it hasn't been officially announced. That seems to be the case.
Yeah, that, what, I read the same thing, and it's interesting because, as you well know, last year the All-Star weekend was really, stretched out to become an All-Star week. It was something that, the players wanted to have specifically for those that were participating, in the weekend festivities, whether they were participating on Friday night or Saturday night or Sunday night. And then with that, obviously, some, maybe a couple more 4 and 5s, happen. Certainly, the history with back-to-backs. And there's been, conversation as to whether or not, training camp gets shortened maybe a little bit, maybe preseason games, instead of playing potentially 7 or 8, maybe that gets cut down to 6 or maybe 5, or, I remember Tony Parker even talking about 4. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how all of that, plays out. But it's something that, Adam Silver, continues to look at in conversation with, the players.
So before we get to some Raptor talk, I gotta ask you, man, has there been any like follow up since the whole Wale incident? Because I think I haven't done my full research here, but I believe you're the only announcer to actually have like a beef with a rapper. So has there been any developments on the Wale front at all, or has that kind of gone by the wayside and you guys have made your peace?
Well, you know what? It's actually been kind of quiet actually for the
Mm.
last couple of years since that happened. But I know since then, even during the regular season or postseason, I haven't actually seen him since that evening, and no, it's all good
Yeah,
as far as I
he's
know.
probably hiding from you. That's all.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think he's probably on to bigger and better things.
So let's talk some Raptors. I mean, obviously they had a pretty good summer so far. They made their moves really quickly. I mean, as soon as like the free agency period started, it was over, and Ujiri had done all his business early. So I guess the one thing we need to kind of focus on is defense, right? Last year that was kind of their Achilles heel. Wasn't that great, and this offseason they immediately got DeMario Carroll, who they have a lot of hopes on rectifying their defense. But other than just acquiring players like DeLon Wright, another defensive guy, DeMario Carroll, as I mentioned, Corey Joseph, a pretty good defender, like what are the challenges ahead of Dwayne Casey in terms of integrating those three defensive-minded players into the system? Or is it a question of just, hey, now I just have the personnel I always needed, and now I can just play the defense I want? Or is there a tactical adjustment on the part of Dwayne Casey that he needs to make sure the three guys he just got in, who they paid a lot of money for, like how do you maximize their defensive potential given the Raptors' struggles last year?
Well, I think it's interesting because I looked at last year and the year before, there was a balance, as we know, clearly post the Rudy Gay trade, there was a balance in the offense and defense. They were top 10 in both offense and defense as far as offensive and defensive efficiency. And then, last year there was a dramatic change. While, the offense became top five, the defense, as you well know, slid, and it was in the bottom third of the league. And a lot of times that is personnel driven. And I think last year when you have a player like Lou Williams, who's an offensive minded player, I think that plays into it. And then you all of a sudden add a DeMario Carroll. Well, you know what you're going to get, a 40% three-point shooter and somebody that is known as a defensive stopper that's going to play the three, which will change, obviously, the role of the Terrence Ross. Adding Bismack Biyombo, who's somebody that in that second unit is going to be more athletic and is known as somebody that can, defend. I think that, those moves, and you mentioned Corey Joseph, I think that a lot of things become personnel driven. It's something that Dwayne talked about last year in training camp. How many times did we hear, rim protection, rebounding, and defense? But ultimately, the style of play became the style of play because, the players through those first 31 games were performing from an offensive standpoint at a high rate. And I think that, at the end of the day, that they felt like this was the way that ultimately we're going to have to play given, who we have, whether it be Gravis and Lou Williams. We're going to be a high efficiency team from an offensive standpoint. So I think, a lot of it ends up being driven by, your personnel. And I think the statement was made, this off season that they want to get back to, that defensive mindedness, based upon their player personnel decisions.
So one of the decisions they made this summer, which surprised a lot of Raptor fans, not others, but certainly when you have a reigning sixth man of the year who won the sixth man award kind of comfortably. Apparently there was no interest in part of the Raptors to bring Lou Williams back, and he obviously found a pretty good home for himself with Swaggy P and Kobe. Were you surprised by the Raptors like not pursuing Lou Williams aggressively in the free agent market and kind of going a different direction?
No, I don't, because I felt that once the Raptors were swept in the first round, I felt that ultimately gave, Masai Ujiri kind of a blank canvas to make the decisions that he felt that needed to be made to, bring the team ultimately to where he wants it and where the fans want it and where the players want to go. Because as you well know, you look at those first 31 games and how many nights, it was, we had some fun with it, the fourth, and, how many nights did you get into that situation where it was Lou Williams big in the fourth quarter, or Kyle Lowry in Boston early in the season had a phenomenal fourth quarter to pull out a game. And there was a lot of games like that. Patrick Patterson was a key ingredient there, through those first 31 games of the season when they went 24-7. He was, top 5 in the league during that stretch in 3-point shooting. And then, the Raptors hit the All-Star break and come back, and including, the postseason, they went 12-20 down the stretch, and they attempted to get back. I think there was a sense of, hey, we can, turn this on. We can get going defensively when we need to. We can play timely D. We can get the shots necessary when we need. And unfortunately for them and for the fans, and that it was, they were unable to get there. And toward the end with Kyle, he was banged up, and then, I remember, late in the season, you could tell there was some frustration there when he felt like, what, these are shots I'm taking that typically I'm making, we're not there. And they were not falling for him. And then you get into the postseason and say, okay, blank slate, here we go. We are going to, take on Washington, a team that we had a tremendous amount of success against during the regular season. And Washington came in and said, we're going to shut down Kyle. We're going to shut down DeMar. We're going to see what they can do from there. And from a second unit standpoint, we're going to focus in on Lou Williams. And they did a tremendous job in doing that. And then ultimately, they swept the Raptors. And so based on all those sort of different scenarios, I can understand why you say, okay, that was a great run. Lou Williams was deserving of the sixth man. He was a key ingredient to a team that won 49 games. But I think when you remove yourself from that and you look at all the different things on the court, you say, okay, in order for us to make that next jump, what, we know we can do these certain things from an offensive standpoint. However, with the second unit, let's go ahead and bring in certain key individuals that are going to be able to allow us to kind of turn up that D.
Like for me, honestly speaking, I think the highs and lows of last season can be directly mapped to Kyle Lowry's health. I think it's sometimes you overcomplicate basketball, and at the end of the day, when Kyle Lowry was healthy last year, he's an all-star guard when he's healthy, and the Raptors were awesome when he was healthy, and not so much when he wasn't. And
I don't disagree. And in fact, I think if you go back, 2 seasons ago, when the Raptors were playing at a high rate defensively, I think a lot of that was, Kyle Lowry. It's so difficult. Everybody talks about, you got to have somebody to, stop, the ball at the point of attack. And with the rules today, it's so difficult when you have the ball in your hand to try to stop somebody defensively when that guy, has the ability to operate offensively the way he wants to operate without you being able to touch him. And that's why now, you hear so much conversation about having a rim protector, somebody back there that can alter things and make you, as you get into the lane, once you break down that D, makes you now think twice about what you're going to do. But, as we used to talk about, quite often, about, Kyle and, the charges that he took. And I thought that the team 2 seasons ago took a lot from that. And I think early on in the year, there was some of that with Kyle. And then, of course, DeMar goes down and, the Raptors go, what was it, 12-9 during that stretch. And if there was a game I could pinpoint, it would be the overtime loss in Portland. Down the stretch, Kyle missed a couple of shots in the fourth that typically he makes that, little move going left, fading left. And, I think that game kind of took a lot out of the Raptors. And I think then you're integrating DeMar back in, and it's kind of remarkable when you miss somebody like DeMar for 21 games, you end up winning 49. But I don't disagree with it.
Yeah. Have you seen Kyle Lowry's picture that he posted on Instagram last week?
I did.
Did you recognize
I
him?
did. He's in shape. Well, JJ Redick, I don't think JJ Redick didn't recognize him.
No, he had to do a triple take on him.
I gotta start working out like him in the off season.
I mean, that picture got me more excited than all the signings combined.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, clearly, with him, and I think having the All-Star game in Toronto, he's going to want to be there once again. Corey Joseph and what he brings to the team. It is exciting, based upon the moves that were made in the offseason.
Yeah. So a couple of Twitter questions that we had here. So like one was about the power forward spot. We got Luis Scola in the offseason, obviously, and then Patrick Patterson's kind of lined up to be the starting power forward right now. And the question is that like we don't really have like a big power forward right now. So given the Raptors' propensity, I guess, or desire to play small ball next year, like will it hurt the Raptors in the playoffs if they face guys like Gasol or Love, which they probably will face, in the second or third round if they get that far? Like, do you see the current lineup as constructed having some challenges against those kind of players?
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned this earlier when the Raptors were performing at a high rate last year. Kind of under the radar were the numbers of Patrick Patterson. He shot the three great, shot the corner three really well. And when his numbers started to dip, so did some of that productivity of the Raptors. And so I think, it'll be interesting to see if he kind of grows into that role now. He's such a team player. You don't have to run anything for him. We know that it's a guard-driven team. It's going to be intriguing to see, JV and his development with respect to DeMarre Carroll, how they integrate him from an offensive standpoint. But going into the off season, the two biggest questions were you going to be able to get a 3 and a 4? And at the very least, could you get one or the other? Because, for Terrence Ross, and, the reality of it is that he's ultimately played a little bit out of position here the last, few years, right? He's really a natural 2. And, we saw some of that as far as a matchup standpoint when DeMar was out. But it is something that I think you pay attention to with respect to the 4. And, one of the things with Masai Ujiri, while you never hear rumblings, that, he is somebody that if he feels as though he can upgrade a certain position that, he will do it. So, I know that, it's always fun to talk about, well, hey, what happens next playoffs. But as we all know, there's so much time between now and the next postseason, right? And there's a trade deadline. There's a lot of different things that could happen. So we don't know at this stage if, the roster as constructed is still going to be the same roster even, 6 months from now. So, but it is going to be interesting to watch the 4 and how it develops. And, does Patrick then step up to that, next level?
Yeah. Don't underestimate Scola, I say. I mean, I think he's been in that. He was great in Indiana last year. I'm not saying he's going to usurp Patrick Patterson, but I think he's going to provide him a strong challenge.
Yeah, but I would say this about Scola is that from a defensive stand, I like him in that second unit, and I like him next to like a Biyombo, right? Because Biyombo is a little bit more, certainly not a little bit, but he's more athletic and active. So I don't know if. It'll be interesting to watch the development of that as well with Scola. I don't know that you're going to be looking to get 30 minutes a night, at this stage of his career, from Luis Scola. So, I still view Patrick as the guy at the starting 4 and Scola coming off of the bench, but, who knows?
So you mentioned JV there, and I've been watching Raptors basketball for a long, long time and covering the team, and it's rare that you find a player that fans stick up for at an emotional level so often. And JV is one of those guys. They really go to bat for him, and they feel that he really can be a lot better than he actually is. And maybe it's a question of opportunity. Maybe it's a question of him doing things a little bit better. And coming up, he's going to be coming up for a big contract extension next summer. And the Raptors are also in the midst of changing their style of play. And he's obviously a post-up center, a traditional big man, if you will. And right now, Dwayne Casey's trying to implement this small ball type of play. So, like, what does JV have to do individually to make himself a better fit in both the offense and defense that the Raptors are likely to play next season? Like, what are some of the changes that he himself has to make so that he can take his game to the next level and become that all-star that many fans believe that he can be?
I've said repeatedly that I believe that he is going to be an all-star. I think for him, it's number one, rebound the basketball. I think that if he has a mindset that he's going to go get the basketball, I think that that's certainly going to be, beneficial to himself and certainly to the team, and it's going to mean more minutes to him. And I think, I said last year even that I felt that, it was a situation where he should average a double-double. And I understand that there's not a lot of plays that are run for him. I'm a huge fan of JV's. I think, number one, he's a great kid. He really is. I mean, he's a good person. And, number two, he loves the game of basketball. And so, you want to see him do well. I believe he has the ability to be an all-star. But I think it starts with, hey, if he could just go from that 8.5 a night, if he can get, 1.5 more rebounds and, a couple of putbacks, all of a sudden now we're talking about somebody that's averaging, 14 points and 10 rebounds or, maybe 14 and 11. And I think that would be significant to allowing him to play more minutes. And then as something that Dwayne Casey, talked about, and certainly, a lot of Raptor fans have followed the team on a daily basis know, they talked a lot about his pick and roll coverage defensively, and I think that that's certainly something to watch. And then also, as we all know, last year, Dwayne, a lot of the nights decided to go with, Patrick and Amir late, and a lot of that had to do, with the pick and roll coverage. So he went a little bit smaller, and I think for a lot of big men in the league right now, a lot of it is dictated on matchups. Yeah. And we saw certainly with Golden State, what did they decide to do? They decided to go small, and they forced Cleveland to essentially take Mozgov off the floor and decided to go that way in order to win. And so, it's always that interesting debate, right, of, well, if they're going small, you go big, and you try to make them, match up to you. And so it'll be, that's another one to me that he goes in this year. I think he should average a double-double.
Yeah, and he's close to it. He's 16 and a half per 36 numbers of 16 and a half and 12 just last season. So it's a question of minutes, and it's a question of, I guess, whether he produces enough defensively to warrant those minutes. Because if you give him 35 minutes a night, he's going to get 17 and 12 easy.
Well, I think from the defensive standpoint, as you pointed out, there were nights where, the Lopez matchup last year, comes to mind, and I forget. I think it was like 31. He had a big night.
Yeah.
And it was Brook Lopez, pardon. And so anyway, JV was having a good night as well, and unfortunately, it's a situation where the other player in front of him had a bit, and there was a couple of those nights that kind of come up, and the defensive part of it is key, right? And we understand that. And so, for JV, as I've said, as you alluded to, I think he's a double-double guy. I think that the key for him is to be there early and often on the glass and be active, and then you're going to earn that trust, and then you'll start to see him in fourth quarters, depending upon, the matchup. And, I've said it since his rookie year, I feel as though, he's going to be an all-star. He's still extremely young. And as we all know with bigs, it does take time. It's such a guard and wing-driven league now, even more so with what Golden State did during the postseason. So maybe it takes a little bit longer than we all think it will. But he's a valuable player. There's no question.
Absolutely. If I had to buy a Raptor jersey, I'm picking Valanciunas. So I think you made an interesting point there on dictating matchups. Like my view of this is that whenever you have two teams going up against each other, the team with the more talent is the one that ends up dictating the matchup. And I think the Raptors maybe now are maybe in that position where DeMar DeRozan's matured a year, Kyle Lowry's fitter and maybe has more experience and he's matured a lot. Jonas Valanciunas is developing. We got DeMario Carroll. So at this point, we might have actually greater talent. So when we come up against a situation where the players aren't an even fit, maybe we could perhaps dictate the matchup more than we have in previous years.
Well, look, you know what, it's an excellent point. I mean, look at the end of the day, when you have a player that you feel as though, in a matchup is going to be able to exploit, a player on the court with certain moves and or talent base, you're going to go to it. And so, hopefully this past year was, a great learning experience for, the Raptors. They now have a player, which I think is important. They now have a player in Corey Joseph that has won. And and I'm not just saying win during the regular season or win a round or win two. I think that's key, that he's somebody that has seen a championship, has been on that floor in that environment. And during Summer League, I had the opportunity to talk to R.C. Buford just about Corey, and he mentioned something really interesting, because I said, when did you guys start to see him really, like, everybody talks about what sort of player he is, what sort of person he is, and when did you internally see, kind of when you knew, like, okay, he's got it, he's a young man that's, got this and is ready to take it to the next level. And he said that he was, not playing much in San Antonio, and that he actually went to Pop and said, Pop, why don't, I want to go down to Austin in the D League, and I want to play. I want to play. I want to get better. I don't want to just sit here, in a suit, and I want to develop my game. And RC said that was kind of the moment that they, as an organization, said, this kid gets it. This kid just doesn't want to be here. He wants to get better. He wants to develop. He wants to get to that next level, because his point in our conversation is, hey, your guys are getting, really, good player, in Corey Joseph. And so I think that's a key, signing, and, somebody that, I think is, won and is going to have that experience. And that's so important, inside of a locker room.
So speaking of that, just guessing here, like who was the voice of the veteran last year for the Raptors? They don't have. Was it Chuck Hayes? Like, who was the guy that kind of was the veteran presence in the locker room? Was it Amir, or who do you think was the most vocal guy in the locker room last season?
I would say that, Kyle,
Mm-hmm.
because he's, the point guard. And I think that, in that locker room that, he was a player, that, stood out, certainly, there are other voices in there, but, at the end of the day, one of the things about any locker room, the reality of it is that, your voice is only heard, when you have the ability to go on the court and perform at a really high level, right? Or everybody looks around you and knows that you've done it in the past. If you're a player that doesn't see much time, if you're somebody that hasn't necessarily done things in the past, it's tough to gain a voice, inside of a locker room.
Paul Pierce.
So
look at Paul Pierce. Like, he's the ultimate example of that, I guess.
Yeah, and I remember his post, game comments after Game 3, which, to me were, just so spot on about, a lot of things. But, he's done it. He gave that. I think he was a big difference during the postseason with Washington, not necessarily during the regular season. And he even said, hey, look, during the regular season, a lot of things come up, a lot of different things happen, but, hey, this is the time. The postseason is the time, and they brought me in here to do this. And, I think he really added a lot of swagger. And it was interesting because John Wall, kind of seeing that, is now kind of stepping to the forefront with Washington. And I had the opportunity to broadcast a few of the Wizards games during the Las Vegas Summer League, and John Wall was there at those games, and he was, talking and kind of sharing, obviously, his thoughts on the game, with some players, and so that's kind of how you graduate to that point, and so having that I think is important. I also think something that really hasn't been talked about all that much. I think having somebody like a Jerry Stackhouse on the staff, I think that was a excellent decision by Dwayne Casey to bring in a player that has obviously done it before, that has been in the league, has been extremely successful not only at the collegiate level but at the NBA level. I think that that's extremely important for Dwayne to have on the bench, and I think that he's going to be a valuable asset not only to Dwayne but then also to the players. And I think that that was a superb move bringing in Jerry Stackhouse.
Let's talk about Amir Johnson just momentarily. Longtime Raptor. I mean, I remember when Brian Colangelo signed him to the contract, fans were like, "Oh, they paid him too much." And when you look back in hindsight, that was one of the greatest contracts ever offered to a Raptor, and it was the most value-added contract that I've ever seen. And Amir Johnson leaves.
Well, look at DeMar's DeMar's deal even. In 9.5, and everybody was, crazy about that one.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I know. It should have been longer. So Amir Johnson leaves the Raptors after several seasons. Who's going to replace what he brought to the team? That grittiness, that constant presence of physicality. That guy who gives it 100% every time. Like, is there a guy you pick on the current roster that's going, that guy can kind of fill Amir's shoes, because he's going to be missed. Even though he wasn't healthy all the time, he still gave it his all. And there was just this confidence in the team when he played that, we had some sort of defensive presence on the floor. So Amir Johnson, even though not healthy, will be missed. And who do you peg on replacing him?
That's an excellent question. I don't know if that. I don't know.
By committee, I guess.
Amir. Yeah, I mean, Amir, as a man, I am, I think he's just a great guy. Amir, not only a fan favorite, he was one of my favorite guys. I mean, he's a good guy. He had a special bond with the fan base, as we all know. And I'm going to miss seeing him around. I'm going to miss his good friend VZ, who would always show up as well. And Amir, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Amir off the court, and just what a great guy he is. He's just he's just a good person. And, there's the personal side is, hey, I'm sorry to see him go. To me, he was the ultimate Raptor in a way. He kind of personified, I think, what, all of us think about, how we want to approach, our life, our job, which is, hey, whether you're a little bit under the weather, maybe you're not feeling all that well, when it's time to punch the clock, you're going to punch the clock and you're going to give it everything that you have. However, at the end of the day, he got, a 2-year deal for $24 million, and he's going to, move on to Boston, and I wish him all the best. So how do you replace, that? That's a good question, because, he was somebody in the locker room. He was somebody, out there on the court, as we all know. How many times, did he, do something on the court, from a defensive standpoint, a block shot or something, and the ACC just became electric, right? So it's going to be interesting. To see, the Raptors without Amir, but yet, you add a younger Bismack Biyombo, and you add Scola, as you mentioned. So, it'll be, interesting, and maybe this opens up the door a little bit more time for, JV even, right? Maybe it is a collective thing, and I think, as we all know, so many things will happen, throughout the course of the season that, will create those sort of moments that, how do you predict, certain things? You can't, they just have to happen, right? And so that to me is always the fun part about being at the ACC or even on the road with all the Raptor fans is that there are moments that happen in the game, and they'll capture the imagination of people and say, you know what, this is the guy right here.
Just closing off, just a couple of off the court things. So you get to fly on the Raptors charter a lot, I guess. That must be fun.
You know what? I do. Every NBA team that I've been with, I've been able to, fly on the team charter, and certainly respect, the ability to do that. And as you would expect, you lose a game and you go on there and it's not happy, and you win a game and you go on there and it's a little bit happier, depending upon who your opponent is. And the coaches, are doing their work, and the players are typically resting up, and I'm sitting next to Jack Armstrong, and we're talking about the game. I mean, it's interesting. You get on the plane, you get on the bus, you get on the plane, and whether they lose, whether they win, you end up, I think, just very much like a fan. Whether you're jumping on the TTC or jumping in your car, headed home after a game, you're talking about it, and that's ultimately what we end up doing. Jack and I will sit there and talk. Leo and I will sit there and talk, or all three of us will be talking about the game, and then ultimately, what's in store, what's the next game.
Yeah. Do you guys get a chance to see the city when you guys visit different different places, or is it just all about the game and you barely get time to kind of go out and kind of enjoy the city itself?
Well, it depends. It depends. I mean, if you have an off day, certainly, depending upon the city, we'll definitely, go out and see some of it. I mean, so many of the cities, I have friends there, or whether you've been, not only from the league or just family or whoever it may be, you'll end up doing a lunch with somebody, or, dinner with someone that you may know, or, we'll go out as a group and you have dinner and talk hoops and stuff like that. But, unlike, baseball, typically you're not in a city for that long, right? Mm-hmm. You'll get in 5, 6, at night. And then the next day, you play a game, and then you're back on a plane, and, depending upon where you're going, you're, landing at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes even 4 in the morning. You're going to the next hotel. You may have a game that night. If you do, obviously, sleeping in, you wake up and, get your, notes together and everything for the broadcast, and then head to the, arena and kind of do it all over again. So it depends. You kind of look at the schedule and you say, okay, hey, we may have a day off in a certain place, and you try to plan something. And then there are other times where, you're, it's funny going, like doing a few Jays games where you actually get to unpack, in basketball, I just hang up my suit. That's about it.
Next summer, we got free agency sweepstakes happening. Kevin Durant's available. The Raptors have the All-Star game. If the season goes well, there might be a lot of momentum heading into next summer. What's your dream free agency signing? Is it Kevin Durant? Is that a realistically is that a realistic? Should Raptor fans actually kind of give up that hope, or is there actually some sense behind thinking about Kevin Durant?
Some validity to it, yeah. It's an interesting question. I don't know that I've allowed myself to kind of go there yet. I end up, I think most of the time, and it's kind of one of those, conversations that, it happens. Hey, what do you think, and what do you hear? And, but, you end up kind of focusing, or at least I do, kind of on the here and now, and about, the team, and, as it's constructed now, and, ultimately what could happen. Who knows? I mean, it was, not long ago, did anybody think that, Cleveland was going to do a deal, in order to bring in Kevin Love, or, there's so many different things that happen. Dallas thought that they were going to get DeAndre Jordan, and, I think they also thought, if not him, that they were going to get LaMarcus Aldridge. And then, the conversation of San Antonio came in. And I remember talking to people in Miami, and they felt that LeBron James wouldn't leave Miami. And he decided to return home to play for Cleveland. So there's so many different variables. It's always fun to talk about, hey, do you think you could get a Kevin Durant? I'm like, yeah, why not? I mean, he was just here this past weekend.
Wearing a David Price jersey. Yeah,
wearing a David Price jersey. And I think with their kickball game got rained out, he decided not to play. And so who knows? I mean, you ultimately don't know, if that'll happen. I mean, look at what's happening right now with Tristan Thompson. And, does Tristan end up just signing a qualifying deal, or does he end up, does Cleveland end up giving him, ultimately what he wants? I mean, so there's so many different things that are out there. That's what makes it kind of fun, right? You can kind of have that, 24/7, 365 day a year, conversation about, hey, do you think this could happen, or do you think that could happen? I think, going back, here's the Los Angeles Lakers with all this money over the last few years, but yet, they haven't been able to go out and get that, one key guy. And you think about, the New York Knicks, and yes, they're able to, maintain and retain, Carmelo Anthony, but yet, they haven't been able to, they're in a rebuild, right? So it's just interesting to kind of see the landscape. And then I think, ultimately, what happens with the salary cap, and does it go where we all think it's going to go? That certainly could change a lot of things as well, and the decisions that are going to be made. And, OKC, I'm sure they're going to do everything they can in order to, keep a Durant. Who's your guy?
Well, obviously, it's Kevin Durant. I mean, he'd be the guy. He grew up wearing a Vince Carter hat, so so I'm rooting for him. There was an interesting point made by Zach Lowe again, that like one of the reasons you may not want to extend JV this summer is because if you sign him to like a $20 million deal, you enter next summer with that money tied in and giving you less money to go against free agents. But if you don't sign him, his cap hold is only about 11 million. So that's 10 million right there. So it's those kind of nuances that also come into play so much that that it's hard to predict. But I think what we can agree on is that the chances of signing a top tier player for the Raptors today are probably a lot higher than they have ever been in the franchise's history.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, up until this point, I think.
And we got Drake to thank for it.
Would say, well, look at you, yeah. But you look at Hedo Turkoglu, right? That was hey, we're able to track. But then what happened? It was Kyle Lowry. Now it's Corey Joseph, and Drake is a part of that. Yes, he this past weekend. As you well know, and Raptor fans know, I mean, he debuted the jersey and wore Corey Joseph's number, and I do think that I don't sit far from him, and you cannot imagine the amount of players from opposing teams that come up to him. At the end of games, during games, before games, I do think that's a part of it. I think Masai Ujiri is a part of it. I think winning is a part of it, and when you put all of that together, it does raise your, profile as an organization. And, players do want to come where they, believe, that they have an opportunity to win. And I think that's, an extremely important ingredient. I mean, look at what David West decided to do with San Antonio. So if you win and then you have, somebody like Masai, and you have Drake involved in all these things. And then, let's not exclude the fans. Think about, Jurassic Park. What did the Cleveland Cavaliers do during, the playoffs? Next thing you know, people are outside the queue watching their games. Where did that idea come from? Well, it came from Jurassic Park and the tremendous fan base that, the Raptors have. And to a player, I don't know, all of them agreed that they had never seen, it was almost like a college atmosphere, the amount of fans that we would see out on the road. I can't tell you how many times during the course of the season that I would talk to other announcers and other people with organizations, whether it be executives and or coaches, that were always amazed at the amount of fans that traveled. And I think that that's a big part of it too. And you wrap that up with what we had, previously discussed. And I think that, the Raptors are a team that people do look at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I used to be a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I used to live in Kansas City. And the only thing, like, I've never seen tailgating at a basketball game before until I saw what's happening in Toronto. A couple of barbecues out there at outside the ACC, and you got yourself a tailgating party going on there. So that's the next step.
Isn't that a bad thing? We're just hoping that we can have them in June.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the playoff exit we didn't talk about too much, but there's no point talking about it because it's really a new team at this point. So there's no point kind of dwelling on that. Major changes have been made. Kind of the engine of the team has changed a little bit. So hopefully next season is a lot better. So what's your plan for the rest of the summer before training? When does your official Raptors obligation start? Is it like on media day?
Yeah, so right around we'll start we'll probably start meeting up. There's always conversations throughout the course of the off season, but then September rolls around. I start doing some college football, but then, conversations, happen. Then they actually happen once the schedule kind of comes out. You kind of take a look at that, and then, you wait for the broadcast schedule to come out, and then that kind of leads to more discussion, and then, discussions, meetings leading up to, media day, and then media day, happens, and then it's on to training camp, and, not even, a few days after that, will be the first preseason game, October 4th, out in Vancouver, and that will, ultimately start it all. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy, that aspect of it. I enjoy going to Vancouver and Montreal and Ottawa. And, in years past, we've been to, Edmonton, and I was in Winnipeg actually a few years ago. Raptors weren't involved in the game. But there was an NBA game played in Winnipeg that I went to. So, those things are always fun. And, there's a lot of, during that time, clinics and, different things that myself or Jack or Leo will go and talk to groups and stuff. And so that's always a lot of fun.
All right. So I one trivia question. No, not trivia, because kind of your opinion question on something. So right now, the Raptors roster, who's their best 3-point shooter at this moment? Like, if you had to pick a guy to do the whole 3-point contest like to do with All-Star Weekend, who would win it? Would it DeMar Carroll, Ross, Lowry, DeRozan? Who would be your pick?
I think DeMar Carroll.
DeMar Carroll.
Yeah, would that be fair? What do you think?
I'm gonna go with the much maligned Terrence Ross because I do think there's one thing Terrence Ross does extremely well, and that's shoot spot up threes. And he struggles with a lot of the with other aspects of the game, but the one thing the guy can do brilliantly is shoot threes at a very high percentage, and he's got a beautiful release. So I'd go with Terrence Ross over DeMar Carroll, actually.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, he did make 10 in a game against the Clippers, right?
Yeah, and like if you look at his percentages, like the times he's a catch and shoot 3-point shooter versus a dribble twice and then shoot it, the difference is huge, and I think that's his biggest strength going into next season. I really hope he finds his way because I know he struggled last season, and like we need him to get going. And in my hypothetical 3-point shootout, he wins it.
Well, look at it's fair. I mean, he shot 37% last year, and I know, DeMar shot, close to 40% right. So, Terrence, I'm with you in that you want him to do well. It's going to be interesting to see, his progression and, somebody that, coming in with that second unit, it may end up being a great thing for him because he may become a focal point of that second unit, and maybe won't have that much pressure and just, go ahead and do your thing. And, defensively, as we all know, he can guard multiple positions. We've talked about this so many times throughout, the year and broadcast and stuff. And, I mentioned the 10 threes against, the Clippers, but, what was it, 5 or 6 days later in Denver, he dunked over Kenneth Faried. We know that he has that ability. We know he can shoot. We know he's extremely athletic. The question now is, can you do it consistently? And, that's been, the question, right? He's had the time. He's developed. He is a young player. He continues to develop. And now you just hope that, kind of everything comes together for him.
Yeah. And he shot 41% from the corner three. So he's got the talent. I certainly think he should be a bigger part of the Raptors' second unit next season. I really hope things work out for him. I'm looking forward to Dwayne Casey mixing and matching some lineups and maybe playing him, a blend of starters and reserves, unlike last year where it was more of a kind of hockey shift.
I mean, look at her. Would you be shocked if you saw Ross and Carroll on the floor at the same time? No. Along with DeMar and Kyle. I mean, if you're going to play small, there's so many different combinations out there, as we well know. And it's going to be interesting. And I think, we'll get a glimpse of some of it, not all of it, but some of it during the preseason because, during the game, the question is, how much of that do you decide to use or do you wait, until, the regular season to kind of, go with it. Sometimes a lot of coaches will hide some things during the preseason.
I think the comments that you made earlier about Valanciunas, or we kind of agreed upon, is how he needs to prove himself on defense to see minutes. I think the same might be true for Ross. I think if he proves himself defensively, he'll stay on the court longer as part of the second unit because Dwayne Casey is obviously valuing defense next season, and if he's able to actually guard a 1, guard a 2 consistently, so that we don't have to always switch on the 1-2. And he can maybe even guard 1, 2, 3 in stretches. I think that's what's going to keep him on the floor. And once he stays on the floor, he gets confidence. And once you have confidence, sky's the limit for a shooter. Because if you're a shooter without confidence, you may as well be sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what? I agree with you. I mean, I think he's somebody that. And look, we saw this before with Dwayne and with. Not only that, but from 2 seasons ago. After the trade, but at times last year when he was awarded more minutes, it was because of what he was able to do from a defensive standpoint, not necessarily an offensive standpoint.
Exactly, yeah. I remember that game when he shut down Chris Paul in LA. I think it was last year or the year before that. That got me excited. So I'm kind of hoping. Do you remember that one? The when he guarded Chris Paul?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, that's one of the things about Terrence that, you watch him on a daily basis and you see, those flashes where he does that, and from a defensive standpoint, he's able to make threes, he's able to get to the rim, can he get to the free throw line? It's a discussion that we've had, on the air, and I'm sure you've had with, people as well. And, those are things that you hope that, he adds every year. It's one of the things that I always admire about DeMar DeRozan. DeMar always comes back with something new to his game, during the off season. So I'm excited to see what he, brings back. Last summer it was, his handle and dribbling left-handed, which led him to, during the off season, using his left hand to brush his teeth and to eat and all those sort of different things. And, sure enough, it paid off. His handle was better, and getting to the rim, his ability to switch and go with his left. And, so I'm excited to see what DeMar brings back. But, as it relates to Terrence, if he's able to, just get a little bit more consistent, it's going to go a long way.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I don't want to keep you any longer. Thanks for coming on and staying well past what we agreed upon. It's really fun talking to you, and let's hope the horrible memories of the playoffs have all but erased by the time preseason starts later. And looking forward to something brand new. And it's exciting times to be a Raptor fan. Exciting times to be a Blue Jay fan at this point. And I think we got enough to entertain us till the Raptors preseason starts with the Jays. So that's great.
You know what? Thanks anytime, and certainly look forward to the season. It's what we all. It's always fun to talk about the off-season moves, and there's certainly going to be more conversation as, the preseason gets underway, and, we'll certainly be looking forward to game one, and then, watching it all unfold, and then of course having the All-Star game here in Toronto is going to be great, and hopefully next season the Raptors are able to get to where we all want them to go, which is deeper into the postseason. So thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.